Hello, wildlings. I'm your Creepsmith, and you found my Fear Forge. Lucky you. Welcome back, wildlings, and thank you for listening. Today's terrible tragedy, Something Came In From the Blizzard, by Grace Omega. Last week, my town was hit by an unseasonable blizzard. I live in country that doesn't normally get a lot of snow, and we were paralyzed. The schools shut, employees were told to stay home, and every shop in town was closed except for the one that I work at. My manager decided that we would corner the market by staying open, and I was chosen to man the till during a shift from 2 to 10 p.m. Of course, no one showed up all day. Why would they? The roads were impassable, and anyone who went outside would get whipped around by freezing, howling winds, as I discovered myself when I trudged through nearly knee-high snowdrifts on the way to the store. The day passed slowly. I spent most of it staring at my phone, listening to the wind shriek outside and wondering vaguely if the roof was going to collapse. When the news of the blizzard broke, people had stripped the shelves of essentials, so we only had junk food and some office supplies left for the day, and I really didn't think anyone could be that desperate to get their hands on either. At 9 o'clock, just as I was starting to wonder if I could get away with sneaking off an hour early, the phone rang. I picked it up, thinking it was my manager checking on me. "Hello?" I said. Silence. The connection was poor and there was a lot of hissing and crackling. After a few seconds, the call simply terminated. I hung up, assuming that the phone lines were damaged, and wondered if the electricity was going to go out next. I had barely finished this thought when the lights in the shop flickered. That was my last straw. I was leaving. I didn't care if I got fired for it. But as I was getting up from my seat at the front till, I saw something unexpected. A customer had arrived. I hadn't heard her come in, which was strange because anyone coming through the automatic front doors would first trigger the alarm bell and second let in a blast of cold air and howling wind. She was very thin and quite short, so much so that I couldn't guess her age. She stood motionless in front of the doors, dripping water on the floor as the snow clinging to her clothes melted. "Hello?" I said. "Ma'am, are you okay?" I was beginning to wonder if she had hypothermia or something. Her jeans were soaked through and she wasn't wearing gloves. Her jacket, one of those heavy-duty ones that zip up to cover most of your face, it was purple. I mean, that'll become relevant in a moment here. It was built for this sort of weather, but the rest of her clothes really weren't. The customer jerked as if I'd startled her and then started to move with a strange, stiff-legged gait, quickly vanishing behind a shelving unit. Her appearance and the way she moved left me unnerved. I'd heard her wet shoes squeaking on the floor in time with her erratic, jerky movement, and a prickle of unease ran up my neck. I should have gone to help her. I mean, it's store policy when there's only one customer on the premises. It makes people feel appreciated. But I stayed where I was, waiting for her to come to me. Except she didn't. Her wet footsteps stopped. Minutes passed. I glanced around, leaning over the counter to get a better view, but there was no sign of her. Now, I really started to worry. Had she collapsed? As I was getting up to go and check, the phone rang again, nearly giving me a heart attack. This time, the call went through. It was my manager, and he was calling to tell me to keep an eye out for a teenage girl who'd gone missing in the snowstorm, as the police thought she might seek refuge in the nearest available open building. She'd last been seen wearing jeans and a purple jacket. I freaked out. There was no sign of the girl anywhere in the store. She couldn't have left. I'd have heard the doors opening. As I was poking around the shelves, calling out in a softer voice than I intended, "Hello? Are you there? Are you all right?" The lights flickered again, and this time went out. The night was bright with that odd blue haze that fills the air in heavy snow, but I still had to take out my phone to see anything. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Wet rubber soles on linoleum, moving away from me. I stopped calling out. Something just wasn't right. Lost, half-dead people didn't creep around like that. I got to the frozen food section where there weren't as many tall shelves to block my view. Nothing moved in the darkness. Even the ever-present hum of the refrigerators was gone, with the power out, leaving the store in complete silence. "Hello?" I said again. "Are you there?" Squeak. Directly behind me. I didn't turn around. Of course I didn't. By this point, I was terrified. I just stood there, hoping like hell that the noise had been my imagination. And then something touched the back of my neck. Something cold as ice. Now I turned around. In the pale light of my phone's torch, the girl's face was bone white. Blonde hair poked out from under her hood, matted to her forehead and cheeks, but the worst of it was her eyes, the only part of her face that was clearly visible beneath the hood and the neck of her jacket. They were wide, terrified, bulging, staring, and unfocused. And they were the eyes of a corpse. Somehow I didn't scream. I was too scared even for that. I just gasped once, like someone plunging into cold water. I waited for her to rush at me, to tilt her head back, to reveal a mouth of fangs, to leap onto me and sink her teeth into my face. But she just stepped closer to me and raised her arms. They moved stiffly, her entire body did. And her fingers were locked into a curled position like a monkey's paw. I sat there, rooted to the ground in fear, waiting for the end to come. Her stiff, frozen arms wrapped around my shoulders. Her body was cold and heavy like something carved out of stone. Then a low, moaning noise came from the girl's chest, sounding like the wind roaring outside. I flinched in fear. It took me a few seconds to recognize the hitching, muffled sounds coming from the frozen ruin of her throat. She was crying. I'm still not sure what made me do it. It didn't make any sense. I guess some human instincts are just too deeply ingrained to shut down, even in the middle of the worst terror. I put my arms around her, hugged her, and the girl vanished. There was no flash of light, no puff of smoke. One moment she was there, and the next she was gone. It was like coming out of a fugue state. The terror of the last 15 minutes overcame me like a tide, and I hauled ass out that store, straight into the storm, not caring that I wasn't wearing my coat or gloves. I ran all the way back to my parents' house, barely feeling the cold. The howling wind sounded like the frozen girls crying, and it followed me every step of the way. By the time I got inside, my nose and fingers were all numb. I later learned that I'd developed minor frostbite over my face and both hands. When the storm ended and the snow thawed, someone found her body in a derelict field on the edge of town. She was 15 years old. She'd gone out into the blizzard unprepared for reasons that no one understands. The police speculate that she'd gotten lost in the heavy snowfall and had blundered into the field, maybe mistaking the shield of thin woodland surrounding it for the trees around her house, and had stumbled through the howling dark, expecting at any moment to see the comforting lights of home. I'll never know why she came to my shop that night. Maybe she was afraid that no one would ever find her body. Maybe she didn't want her parents to suffer the uncertainty of not knowing what had happened to her. Or maybe she just wanted to come in from the cold one last time. Yeah. Maybe just because you're dead doesn't mean that you're no longer human. Anyway, stay scary, wildlings, and make the most of your nights.